Welcome to the Three Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Axelrod from WKYC. Joining me, as always, is waiting for next year's Craig Lindor and
WKYC TV's Ben Axelrod. Yeah. You might recognize Ben Axelrod from his TV appearance this morning on live on Lakeside?
Lakeside Today.
Lakeside Today, sorry.
Yeah, doing a little guest co-hosting this week on Lakeside Today with the great Holly Strano, but certainly much more comfortable talking sports as per usual.
We're now more comfortable. The top button's undone. We're sitting in some undisclosed basement room.
Yeah. We're in our WKYC digs, but
this is where we like to be.
This is definitely where I feel more comfortable. But it's kind of funny. We've been doing this podcast now. I think we're running on 13 or 14 episodes now, and usually it's been the Browns, but sometimes we've had some Cavs mixed in, and we had the Indians playoff run. But you've always you show up here at WKYC or we get together on Skype, and we always know what we're going to talk about. Like, we don't even really have to do much to any show prep.
No.
Just because we both live in Cleveland now, we both follow this pretty intently. I don't really know what to talk about today. I mean, we're going to talk about the Browns, just because I think that's one thing about the NFL is why it's you couldn't say grown in popularity anymore, but why it's reached this popularity is, the 1 week a game format kind of lends itself to sports talk and to discussion and to debate.
Right.
But the Browns are 0-9, and like they lost to the Lions, and you could argue they played maybe their best game of the season, but
even when we're hand-delivered something like DeSean Gibson's comments, it's like, I don't even know what to say about him.
Right.
And for those who didn't know, DeSean Gibson basically said what everybody else knows, that everybody thinks, that the front office doesn't support the team and guys are miserable in this level of a rebuild, which is not shocking.
No, it is. It's shocking, I guess, in the sense, relatively shocking, in the sense that it's on record. Like, you don't, even if it's, we see ex-players bash their former teams all the time, but you don't see them do it to the extent that DeSean Gibson did. And
he had an axe to grind. He apparently asked the host to specifically ask him about Cleveland.
Yeah, I heard that too, and it's going to be interesting. He's going to be on a conference call with a bunch of Browns beat writers later today. I'm interested to hear how that goes. But yeah, he said, I guess the one, if you want to kind of pivot off of what he said, I think was interesting in the sense that, I listen to Ken Carmine and Anthony Lima pretty much every morning, and I'd say even a year ago, if an ex-player did that, if Alex Mack had done that last year, you'd get a lot of calls, calling in defending the Browns. A lot of people are siding with DeSean Gibson. And you're right, it's nothing we didn't know already. It's no duh. Like, the Browns are a disaster, and DeSean Gibson is lending his voice to that. But you're not seeing a lot of people, Browns fans, bashing DeSean Gibson now. They're kind of just like shrugging and they're kind of agreeing with him. And I think, speaking for myself, I personally am happy somebody's putting their voice to this.
Well, and I got into a bit of a conversation, even when you get down to like the literal football details of it. He signed a 5-year, $36 million deal. It basically looks like a 2-year, $12 million deal with 3 options, 3 kind of expensive options.
Right.
But it's not a crazy deal. It's not a crazy deal for DeSean Gibson. Some other people on my timeline said that he was injury prone. He had a tough time staying on the field in Cleveland. From the moment he became a starter at safety, he averaged 13 games a year. Mm-hmm. It's not amazing. But it's pretty typical of linebacker, safety, corner.
Yeah.
It's not it's not crazy injured. So I think from that aspect, that colors a lot of the Browns' commentary about it. Is like, there are guys like Travis Benjamin and DeSean Gibson and Taylor Gabriel who are out there producing. Mitchell Schwartz, forget Alex Mack, who might have absolutely wanted out no matter what.
He did.
But there are guys who earned their second contracts who didn't get them here, who could be that middle class of NFL player that Joe Thomas talks about the Browns desperately missing with all the turnover over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I've seen a lot of fans, they blame it on the constant overhaul, Sashi Brown was in the building. He knew what DeSean Gibson meant to the defense. And no, DeSean Gibson's not Ed Reed or anybody, but now the Browns are in a position where their first-round pick, Jabrill Peppers, has to play out of position because they don't have a free safety on the roster, so they have to put Jabrill Peppers there. And now they don't have a free safety or a strong safety, essentially. It's very... The handling of the 2016 offseason was very odd. And there was even a whole article that Mike Silver did about how Hugh Jackson got sick like right before the start of free agency and how that threw a wrench into everything. And I don't know how much validity there is to that because, you still have a front office in place. You still
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you still have guys who are handling these negotiations. I don't know how much the head coach being involved changes that, but it just kind of speaks to, I guess, why they felt the need to strip this thing down to the bare bones. I mean, I don't think DeSean Gibson makes the difference between 1 and 24 or whatever they're at and 3 and 21. But at the end of the day, like, this was a guy who had proven himself as an NFL caliber starter.
Yes. And
now you're more than a year and a half into this thing, and you couldn't argue they're in a better place than they were when they let him walk.
No, and it. I always go back to Joe Thomas's comments about the middle class. It's not about the Browns had the quarterback and they let him get away and he went and signed a $100 million deal somewhere else and became, the Pro Bowl savior.
Right.
But there are 5, 6, 7 guys that, from Jabal Sheard on, in most recent memory, that could and should probably still be playing here, and maybe would have been supplanted by starters. Maybe they would have been cut by replacements, but they could have taught their replacements. And the replacements are being thrust into action before they're ready. You talk about Lima and Carmen. The latest A to Z podcast, they pointed out that the battle between Notre Dame and Miami this week could have included both DeShone Kizer and David Njoku.
Yeah.
Both those guys came out early.
Yeah, probably should have.
And those are both guys that the Browns are counting on to start against real live NFL men who have like 3, 4, 5 years experience. And these guys are not just starting for the Browns. They are key starters for the Browns.
It's not like Deshaun Watson when he was healthy in Houston, where you're plugging him in and he's playing alongside Hopkins, and he's playing, with a defense that's been in place for a few years now. You're right. I mean, they are relying on these, 20 and 21 or 21 and 22-year-olds, and it's not, especially with Joe Thomas out now, it's not like they're doing it with any or much veterans around them.
Duke Johnson is one of the most seasoned veterans on the team. Isaiah Crowell.
Duke Johnson was drafted in 2015.
I know, these are like 3 and 4. They're in their 3rd and 4th years.
Duke Johnson never wore the old style Browns jersey. He's been here. Danny Shelton, you're right. Danny Shelton is like the face of this team, right now publicly, because he's a first round pick who hasn't flamed out and has been here now in his 3rd year. And that, that should be a guy who's just now starting to emerge into what he's supposed to be. And instead, you're relying on him as the bedrock of the team. I mean, if you've been listening to us since the start, we were never under any illusions over what this season. We didn't think this was a playoff team, obviously. No. We didn't think this was a 6-win team. But for them to continue to lose at this historic rate, something is clearly very, very wrong in their plan. And I guess now the only question is whether Sashi Brown and company are going to change course, or whether they're not even going to be around to do that.
Well, and I think a lot of people, and I don't think this is a straw man, I think a lot of people that I come into contact with take the youth of this team and they bolster the idea that the plan is working because they're young.
Right, because they're starting. That, for some reason, because they've drafted X amount of starters, means something.
I do think it could pay dividends, but if we're talking about the Browns' potential, like everything goes right from this point on and they make a playoff game, we're not talking about 2018. At best, we're talking about 2019, and probably more realistically, we're talking about 2020. If you're talking about the maturation of a completely and totally drafted roster which has very minimal free agency implemented into the plan.
Right.
You're talking about a 5-year plan, and like, I just don't know that it ever had to be that painful. I don't think that it makes your ceiling that much higher to make it this painful. And so I do question the plan. Like, I don't question the plan of starting over. I think the Mike Pettine's final year, that team was old and bad. Yeah. And I think it's better to be young and bad, but I think they've missed kind of in that middle in terms of I worry that they're stunning the growth of these young guys by being this bad.
No, I certainly agree with that. And the buzzword that always gets brought up on the radio or in interviews or when a new coach takes over a new front office is culture. And it definitely is a buzzword, I think, to a degree. Winning builds culture, I think. But these guys, all they know is losing. Like, this is what they know. Like, and it's not that they know going 3-13. It's that they know going at this point 1-24. Like, it's, and to them, this is normal. And this is, I think there's something to, I think it's interesting. The parallel that always gets brought up is the Philadelphia 76ers, and that, well, look, everything turned out okay there because they drafted Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons panned out and all of this. And to a degree, that's right, although I think it's dangerous to compare basketball to football when in basketball, literally one player can be the difference between a playoff team and a lottery team, and in football you need certainly much more than that. But there were real problems in that Sixers rebuild that cost Sam Hinkie his job because they didn't take into account the real effects that losing on the field has on a franchise, or losing on the court has on a franchise. And I think the Browns are kind of at that point right now.
Well, and just think about the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers were going full Sixers, and they had Kyrie, and then they drafted DeSean Waiters. If LeBron doesn't come back, Kyrie and the bunch we'd be looking at Anthony Bennett. We'd be looking at it'd be Kyrie and Wiggins.
Yeah.
And how successful would we feel like that plan had been? The culture of losing negatively impacted Kyrie and DeSean Waiters.
Drastically.
Horribly, yeah.
I mean, that's Deion's career didn't get on track until like his 4th year in the NBA,
and maybe
after
he had
his
something
4th
to do with it too.
Right. Oh, sure. But that's you can only. It's definitely they're kind of codependent, the franchise and the player. But when you're dealing with players that young, the franchise, I think, has to shoulder some of the burden of responsibility.
And we've talked about Joe Hayden not starting right off the bat, but here we've got Jabrill Peppers out of position, a first-round pick.
Right. Like, how do you even evaluate Jabrill Peppers this year? Because there's a part of me, being the pessimist that I am, that wants to add him to the negative side of Sashi Brown and Paul DePodesta's track record, but the guy's not even playing his correct position yet. And yet what he's shown, I don't know if he could play his correct position in the NFL, but it goes even to DeShone Kizer. And DeShone Kizer played his best game of the season on Sunday against the Lions, and the team still lost by 14 points. Yep. It's, we talk so much about, if they find their quarterback, this rebuild looks a whole lot differently. But when you have DeShone Kizer going out there and actually playing well, and I know he had to leave the game because of injury, and maybe the game looks differently if he is healthy, but maybe they're not just a quarterback away. Maybe there are real not maybe, there probably are real problems that go beyond just finding their quarterback.
I agree with you, because I think I'm not saying DeShone Kizer's a top 10 quarterback at all.
Yeah.
But I think he emulated a 11, 12, 13th best quarterback in the league for 1 week last week.
They still
lost by 14 points.
He gave you that Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco type of performance that Cleveland has been so deprived. They haven't even had that baseline performance from a quarterback since like Josh McCown in 2015 maybe.
Yeah, we can probably name the games where they got it. It's like, you're talking about a handful of Brian Hoyer games. You're talking about a handful of Josh McCown games. Jason Campbell.
Yeah.
Jason Campbell gave us a couple of those games. But I mean, it's a handful of games over the last decade.
And the other thing about that is Cody Kessler is a guy who this regime drafted in the 3rd round, which we talked so much about the A.J. McCarron compensation. Like, this regime used a third-round pick on Cody Kessler. And Cody Kessler, at his very floor, I think should be a quarterback for a guy you're taking in the third round. I'm not saying I think Cody Kessler should be this because I don't know if he could be this, but for quarterback X who you drafted in the third round, his floor I think should be backup quarterback who, when your starter leaves with a rib injury, you can put into the game, and by the time the starter comes back, the game is in the exact same spot. And that's not what happened. Cody Kessler came into the game, and by the time DeSean Kaiser came back, the Browns were completely out of it already. That's a black mark against this franchise. That's a black mark against this regime.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, would also point, how many passes did Cody Kessler throw? How many times did they hand the ball off when he came in the game? It was a very strange game plan.
It's not an either-or thing.
This team, man. So, all right, Peyton Manning.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to get is I think we can agree that even if you want to see this, or regardless of what you thought about Sashi Brown and Paul DePodesta, I think at this point it's very apparent that not having that football credibility, that quote-unquote football guy, that was a big problem. That was a big mistake. If they were going to do this thing unconventionally, they should have maybe at least tried to make it look a little more conventional or put somebody in there.
You've got a front office and a coach both answering to the owner, as opposed to having any kind of an intermediary with any actual expertise in running the business of football.
Right.
Which is, I think we're finding out is a big problem.
It is a big problem, but they certainly lack in the football credibility department.
Yes.
The Peyton Manning rumors now, they're becoming a thing. They are a thing, right?
Even beyond our trolling with our GIFs and pictures on Twitter.
They are, I mean, it's one of those things where random Twitter users have information on the house. It feels like a college football coaching search. Like, it feels like,
Which is silly, because Peyton Manning's not going to buy a house. At least not right away. He doesn't need to.
No.
Like, that's the last thing he's going to do.
Yeah. You see conflicting, the house stuff, that's not real.
It's
but,
goofy. It's funny.
There's definitely enough out there that makes you think he's been offered a position. He's been talking to Jimmy Haslam. What do you think of the Peyton Manning deal?
I love it just because it's entertaining.
Yeah,
that's part of it too. But I'm married to a Colts fan.
Yeah,
I'm all in on Peyton Manning. I think he's actually become underrated in some ways because
is he even rated?
Yeah, as like a lifetime quarterback.
Right.
I think he was as much of a franchise changer. He never had a Belichick.
No.
Never did. Tony Dungy got a bunch of credit, but he kept winning with Jim Caldwell.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, he ended up not getting enough credit, and he maybe stuck around too long because his body failed him at the end. But I think we've now kind of undersold him and oversell Tom Brady, if we're getting into that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both great, but
oh yeah. I mean Peyton Manning's probably as close to LeBron James as a football player as we've seen, in recent history.
But even beyond that, it was the because I was so overexposed to him.
Yeah.
It was the little things, like the way organizationally, like he didn't believe in hazing rookies.
Yeah.
He's like, why would I haze a rookie? I'm going to need that guy by week 13.
Yeah.
So just a lot of those leadership, organizational kinds of things. And I know there are some things from Tennessee that maybe stain his record a little bit.
That's going to be interesting in today's news cycle, how that gets processed.
But I think he got through it last year.
He got through it, yeah. It came up, when around the time he retired, I think. But to get thrust back into the spotlight, just specifically in this new, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, I'm sure you could Google it and figure it out. But there's some stuff from when he was a freshman at Tennessee, I think,
where he was kind of abusive to a trainer.
Yeah, or
inappropriate.
Yeah. Inappropriate with a trainer, allegedly. Trying to cover our bases. But it would be interesting just to see because.
Well, I'm not trying to soft sell it.
No.
At all.
No.
I'm trying to say, hey, Google it if you must.
Yeah.
If you want.
Yeah, it would be interesting. For a franchise that has been plagued at the quarterback position for 30 years now, and specifically in the last 20, he is probably as close to a quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer as you could find. Not saying he would. He's run these passing camps. He just seems well connected enough and has an eye for this stuff.
He knew better than to draft Johnny Manziel. He's the one who kicked him out of a camp.
Yeah, he did.
But you do have some risk of Holmgren Syndrome, where Holmgren was a great coach.
Yeah.
And you bring him in to be president, and you have no idea if his experience as a coach transfers to being a president. And we don't even know what they're going to try and bring Peyton.
Right.
Is he going to be an owner?
Well, that's what I was going to say is we don't even know what the setup would be.
Yeah.
If it would be, because I think the Broncos have a setup where John Elway is the quote-unquote
team president,
but I think he has like a football GM working in place too.
And he also owned an arena league or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can put that to the side
it's business
as much as you would like.
Yeah.
Like that's experience running an NFL organization.
And so I don't
or a football organization.
I don't want to judge Peyton Manning good hire or bad hire.
No.
We don't even know if they're going to hire him. 2, we don't know what the setup would look like or what the structure of the organization would be like. I do think the idea of football credibility is very important.
Well, and if it does give the Browns instantaneous NFL credibility, then it's up to them what they do with it. When Mike Holmgren had that instantaneous football credibility, he used it to hire Pat Shurmur.
Right.
Like that doesn't mean that Mike Holmgren was doomed to fail no matter what. It means that he made the wrong hire. He probably should have coached the team himself. If nothing else, he should have hired a different coach. Because
Right.
Pat Shurmur was a failure.
They were talking about that today on the radio about how Hugh Jackson last year was in his honeymoon period, and how Pat Shurmur never people hated that hire so much. I hated it so much, the Pat Shurmur hire.
From the minute.
You're right. It was complete off the board. Nobody thought of him, and
that was back in the days where I was kind of codependent, and I was like, well, let's wait and see. Maybe it's not just because they share an agent, and maybe this. I was always looking for ways that the Browns weren't stinking up the joint and making mistakes.
Yeah.
But man, I was wrong.
Yeah, you were wrong. You just have, and it goes beyond Peyton Manning. There's the Manning family. He is, and I think one thing that's important is, I said he's like the LeBron James of football in a sense, and he also likes Jimmy Haslam. Which, if we're to, I guarantee you, football credibility is going to be a big buzzword in the coming weeks, or into the offseason. And it's going to be hard for somebody to want to come and work for Jimmy Haslam. And the fact that Peyton Manning has that connection to Jimmy from Tennessee, that's no small thing. That kind of makes him candidate 1A and 1B and 1C, really, in my opinion. You want to know what's weird is your wife will probably hate hearing this. I think of Peyton Manning every bit as a Bronco as I do a Colt.
That's kind of funny.
Isn't it? Because he only played 4 years for the Broncos.
Yeah.
Or 4.
He set all the records with the Colts.
He did. No, that's, I don't think they wear helmets in the Hall of Fame, but
I still think of him as throwing to Marvin Harrison.
Oh. Yeah.
That's the way I think of him. And he probably threw even more to Reggie Wayne.
Yeah, I think he did. I think Reggie Wayne might have gone down as
his
the
biggest
Colts
receiver.
all-time leading receiver.
Certainly Peyton Manning's biggest Colts receiver.
Right.
But I think of Marvin Harrison.
Edgerrin James.
I think of Edgerrin James.
Those teams with no defenses.
And I think of specific performances. I can't remember how many points it was, but erasing a 21-point deficit on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Just those kinds of things.
It's always weird, because we see it all the time when, Dwayne Wade in a Cavs uniform right now. That is very strange, and clearly he's past his prime. But Peyton Manning played 13 or 14 years for the Colts, and then went to the Broncos and still played at an MVP level.
Yeah, his rookie year was 97?
98.
98.
He was
97 draft.
No, 98 draft.
98 draft,
the year, but 97 was the year he should have won the Heisman.
Got it.
And then he went and played in 2 Super. He was a shell of himself by the end with the Broncos, even though he left winning a Super Bowl. But it's
still better than Brock Osweiler.
Yeah, it's just weird because a lot of times, Dwayne Wade, when he retires, he'll go back and sign a one-day contract with the Heat, or maybe he'll play half a season with the Heat or whatever. Peyton Manning retired a Bronco, and some of that was coming off the Super Bowl, but I just always thought that was weird.
They've already honored Peyton in Indianapolis. That was also the day that the vice president was at the game.
Yeah, that oh God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
What else is interesting right now? Anything else on the Browns?
I don't think so. It feels like a waiting game.
It does.
The Browns played their best game.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
You were very adamant last season about 0-16. This is probably where we should have started. That you didn't want them to go 0-16. Do you feel the same way this season?
I'm not as desperate about it anymore. Last year was it beat me down so far as a fan, that I don't care about the record books anymore. I probably shouldn't have cared last year, but I'm that apathetic about it. Like, I think this team probably deserves an 0-6. Not the players. I'm very much like DeSean Gibson, protecting the fans.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not after these players. It's not their fault. I think it's on the front office. I'm still on the front office like 70% and the coaching staff 30% in terms of blame. And
and it goes to sell the Browns, right? It goes to, this is Jimmy Haslam's baby out there, and this is, we, like you said, like, why are we wasting all this time arguing over the coaching staff and the front office when this is everything we've ever seen from Jimmy Haslam just repeating itself?
Yeah.
I'm with you. I didn't really feel strongly about it last year one way or another, although I do think, like,
there were some people who were mad about that parade.
Yeah.
And I was not mad about the parade. I'm like, it is what it is if they can't win a game.
Right.
And I also hate saying it is what it is, but in this case,
it was what it was.
Absolutely.
I don't think they're going to go 0-16, although obviously, as we, we're on the other side now of 0-9.
I think they're going to beat Mitch Trubisky in Chicago.
On Christmas Eve again.
Of course.
Just like last year. A new Browns tradition. Whatever they do, you would think they're going to set the record, and I don't know what the record is, for worst 2-year record. And so that's,
and they're pushing futility records
right.
left and right.
Yeah, I agree. There is certainly a part of this where I think they deserve it to go 0-16. And I agree. I don't even, like, outside of Kenny Britt, I don't even, like, dislike any of the players. It's not like this is a particularly unlikable team.
No.
And we've had that in the past in Cleveland. We've had unlikable Browns
You're right.
teams.
There's no Manziel. There's no Justin Gilbert. There's no Greg Little.
Yeah.
I feel very good about, from what I know of Corey Coleman, there's a good story in Brian Body Calhoun.
Yeah.
Kirksey.
Christian Kirksey.
Yeah.
I agree.
And even Jabrill Peppers has not had any kind of like
Peppers.
A Michigan.
Right.
Braylon Edwards struggled, and when he failed, a lot of people rubbed his nose in the whole Michigan thing.
Yeah.
He didn't deal with it well.
No, he certainly did not. No, but I do think this franchise and what they've done, they'll get the record they earn, basically,
yes.
and that's very clear. But yeah, you look at that Bears game. You look at they play the Chargers again, although it's out on the West Coast.
Sure.
They get Josh Gordon back theoretically in a couple of weeks. Which
is crazy.
I can't believe he's going to play another game for the Browns
again.
He hasn't played since 20. Like, do you realize how long ago 2014 was?
The storylines that Browns fans are faced to deal with in November of a season that's barely half over is absolutely, like, we would, if it was simply just draft talk because the team only had one win and they were going down the toilet, okay.
Right.
But no, we've got basically either a news or a fake news campaign coming straight from the coaching staff to the media that's against the front office. We've got weird interviews with former Bears all-world linebackers who failed out as coaches. We can't even tell if Mike Singletary was interviewed or not.
Right. And why is he interviewing for any position on November 8th or whatever 11th, it was?
Yeah.
9th? Yeah. I agree. Last year I was more in favor of 0-16 because the 49ers were so bad that I thought that's what it was going to take to get the number 1 overall pick. And my thought was, if you're going to be this bad, at least benefit from it and get Myles Garrett. That's the other thing is this year, I think they're going to wind up with the number 1 overall pick regardless. So I don't really have a dog in the fight. So we'll see. Let's touch on Carlos Santana real quick, and let's touch on the Tribe. Right now, as of taping this on Wednesday afternoon, he is not going to accept his qualifying offer from the Indians, which would have paid him $17 million for next season. Right. He's setting up meetings with Boston. He's setting up meetings with the Mariners.
There are apparently 10 teams.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Carlos Santana is going to be back with the Cleveland Indians. And I find that a little surprising.
I think he wants to be here, but I don't know at what levels the Indians can come up and match, or if there's a middle ground where he takes a slight discount for a little more long-term security. I just know that it's going to break my soul if he goes to Boston, because for somebody my age who went to Boston University when Manny Ramirez signed there, and then had to watch Victor Martinez get traded there, which
Victor was the one who came to mind.
That's the worst trade in the history of the Cleveland Indians of my lifetime, in my opinion. In my personal opinion. That's a guy who never should have played a single game in another uniform.
No, at least not. What's crazy is he went on to play like 10 more years.
Yes.
Like it wasn't some aging vet they got rid of. Like,
there are some guys, Jose Ramirez might be that guy. I'm pretty sure Francisco Lindor is that guy, where if you're all things equal, those guys should never play a game in another uniform.
I agree. Well, they locked up.
Martinez was that guy.
They locked up Jose to a very team-friendly deal. I mean, obviously they didn't foresee him becoming an MVP candidate,
right.
But I feel good about Jose. Frankie, that's like, I have this overwhelming dread when I think about Francisco Lindor, because he is one of the bright young stars in baseball. And when you think about the contracts that Bryce Harper and Mike Trout and some of these other comparable players, I mean, I don't know if he's Bryce Harper or Mike Trout. I know he's not, but he's that kind of level of star.
If the Indians are going to keep Francisco Lindor long term, it's going to take giving up some of those team control years and quote unquote overpaying those team control years,
which at this point they should do.
Oh yeah.
He has proven he is who he is. Like, he is going to be in the MVP race. He's going to be in the All-Star game every year.
So if under team control you only have to pay him like $4.5 or $5 million, you need to triple that and gain 5 years of his free agency as a result.
I couldn't agree more.
And all indications are they're trying to do it.
I hope so. And to me, that should be obviously they have some big free agent decisions to make. They're going to try to re-sign Jay Bruce, I think. I don't, that will be a tough pill to swallow if they lose both Carlos Santana and Jay Bruce after picking up Michael Brantley's option, which seemed like a very questionable decision.
Although I might be coming around on that, because I think that Michael Brantley, while that's an expensive deal, and it's going to be weird if he's the one they keep and they miss out on the other two, but I think that the Indians had some semblance of a thought that the market was going to be way, way crazy for Carlos and Jay Bruce.
Yeah, maybe.
And that they might end up holding the bag, not having anything to show for it, and not having that one piece that they could count on or hope to count on as a wild card. Because let's be honest, if the Indians didn't have the history that they had in the quote-unquote cheap Dolans,
right,
we wouldn't care about $12 million for Michael Brantley. Like, that's just what it costs to have a process. I mean, the Indians once gave Juan Gonzalez a one-year, $10 million deal on the hopes that he could, and it paid dividends. It was great. So here we are 10 years later, or however many years later.
No, I think it's like 20 years later.
and it's $12 million for Michael Brantley. Like, that's just what it costs to operate in MLB.
I think, I don't even view the Brantley thing though so much as the through the prism of quote unquote Dolan's cheap.
Right.
Because I just think that's probably the reality for a mid-market MLB team, is if you're picking up $12 million option on one guy and you have these impending free agents, like, that's going to have an effect on how you deal with those negotiations. It doesn't seem like Santana's going to be back, and that's kind of a bummer, I think, because he's a guy who came up through your system, who was kind of, at one point he was like Frankie Lindor when Santana coming up. And
once Santana leaves, we'll have nothing to show for the Casey Blake trade. Just nothing.
Can't argue with that. I think there's probably a chance, though, they keep Jay Bruce. I'm not punting on that. I think they liked having him. I think, if they can get a comparable deal, it seems like they're still very much in that one.
Yeah, I think so, too. And if the Indians are still better off than just over time. It's hard to lose anybody, especially somebody who's as lovable player and so tied to the team as Carlos Santana. But I mean, the fact is they did pick up Encarnacion. They do have all these young guys. They do have guys. The 7-foot tall center fielder, his name always escapes.
Bradley Zimmer.
Bradley Zimmer. Yeah. They've got these young guys, and so they're set up to lose a couple guys here and there.
Yeah,
it stinks when it's somebody that you love and
that
you like.
Yeah, I agree, and it's
and they don't get better if Carlos Santana leaves.
No,
they get worse.
They certainly don't, and that's what's going to be a tough pill to swallow, just because of the way the season ended.
Yeah.
And you almost wish you could reverse off seasons, where last off season was the one where they got worse, and this one they got better, but. We'll see. It'll be interesting. But that's going to do it for today's 3 Sports Podcast. He's Craig Lindor from Waiting for Next Year. I'm Ben Axelrod from WKYC. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe on iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend. We'll be back with you next week breaking down all the latest in Cleveland sports.